it's not really evening yet here. It's still 2:00 in the afternoon. So I'm adjusting accordingly.
Quite the mountain to go over.
I have light. I'm going to get through this week. We'll see.
We can hear you. We can see you. Perfect. Everyone hopefully is tuning in to this. So, we'll see. The big question here is, or not really question, but the big happening of Week 6, 2 Monday night games. So that's why we're on so early. 5:00 p.m. Eastern start for the Bills-Chiefs game. So we're going to get right into that and preview that game. Thanks, Dan. I think Dan added these spreads and over-unders here from BUSR. Remember to always check out busr.com/going-for-2 for a 20% bonus offer when joining. So you can start betting tonight on these Monday night games. So again, we start with the Bills and Chiefs. Both teams 4-1. The over-unders at 56 currently. Chiefs are 6-point favorites.
So they were 5. So they've increased the spread after Tuesday's night game. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, hearing now that we talk about injury report, there's Full Press Chiefs actually has tweeted out the inactives will be Sammy Watkins, Le'Veon Bell, DeAndre Washington. For the Bills, TJ Yeldon, Dawson Knox, fantasy-wise, which means that John Brown, Zach Moss are both active. Also looks like Tre'Davious White, the cornerback, is active for the Bills. So considering that, the key players coming back for the Bills, you'd figure, if anything, that spread would drop. So is that making us all more likely to pick the Bills because of that, or still trusting the Chiefs?
Quick question. Is TJ Yeldon a healthy scratch? Is he a scratch because Zach Moss is back? Or is he...
It doesn't specify, but that's what I would assume.
Then I'm picking the Chiefs. I'm picking the Chiefs. Not with the spread, just straight up. With the spread, I would pick the Bills.
Okay.
Plus the weather, you said, is really bad?
Well, it's kind of raining. Looks like it's about, it said 10 degrees Celsius. So that's what, like 45 degrees Fahrenheit-ish, 50? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I know what Celsius is.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
It's a nice autumn day. There you go.
Okay.
It's not that cold.
That's the autumn.
It's in Buffalo, right? So you could say autumn in New York. Which is where this game's. Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna not sing. We're gonna sing some good fantasy tunes for you here.
Here we are.
The Bills, I think, are some of the biggest surprises that we've had this season. I know Dan asked both Glass and I, biggest surprise of the year, and both kind of gravitated towards the Bills. I'm not sure if Gladys, you were necessarily leading that because of this game, but I was definitely surprised with how well Stefan Diggs is playing. I know Josh Allen's been quite an improvement in terms of his rates. So, Dan, you want to run through some of the numbers that you found on both those players?
Well, find is very amicable because I really just found a website. But his completion percentage has come up nearly 17%, about 11% since last year as well. He's at 69.3. QBR has come up in that span as well to 86.8 this year from 47.9 last year. That says a lot. His rushing attempts per game, he's rushing less, which is weird for fantasy value because obviously someone like Josh Allen can make way on the ground, and we've seen him obviously vulture running back after running back as well, but he is running less per game as well at about 5.8 rush attempts per game, down from 7.4 in 2018, so he's coming down about two attempts per game. His pass attempts, 37.8 this year. That's massive. 26 in 2018, 28 in 2019. So he's passing more, and his accuracy is coming up while he's rushing less, and he's still extremely fantasy. I mean, amazing. He's amazing fantasy-wise. So Josh Allen has cleaned up his accuracy. This is something we were talking about, or Gladys wanted to talk about, and I think that was very, very worth noting because once you actually see it, because obviously Josh Allen has been the brunt of a lot of distaste within a fantasy community, obviously because he's not as smooth as what some might have been, but this year it's hard to argue. He has been amazing this year. When you see some of those numbers like the QBR come up nearly double, it says something about how he's been.
I have a quick question for both of you that I just thought of when you started talking, Dan. So the Bills are averaging 3.8 yards per carry, which is lower than what they were averaging last year. Also, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are like, I think 7th or 12th in rushing yards when they were 1st or 2nd. Do you think that this has something to do with the late start or with the non-postseason, and it will increase gradually, or is this a trend that is going to last throughout the season for both rushing teams?
Cool.
Well, I do wonder if, seeing the way that those teams both lost playoff games last year, like neither team won a playoff game, even though they had tremendous success in the regular season. And it really did come down to, when the quarterbacks needed to make throws, they just weren't as accustomed to, especially the Ravens. I mean, they were down the entire game, right? And that has not been their game plan. I mean, the Bills did have a big lead and they kind of blew it. And then when Josh Allen was finally needed at the end to really win it with his arms, it seemed like, again, the moment was too big for him. So I wonder if both those teams made a conscious effort we're not going to shelter our quarterbacks in season. We're going to put them out there. They're going to gain more valuable experience. That way, when the time comes in the playoffs, these quarterbacks are going to be ready. So I could definitely see that they're looking towards those playoff games and thinking that, extra reps early in the season will benefit them later in the season. So I do think this might be a trend, maybe a slight overreaction to playoff losses last year, but both teams are winning. So, I mean, if you can get your quarterbacks more experience and still win the games, it seems like a good decision. So I do expect that it'll maybe continue this way.
Okay. Thank you.
Baltimore's rush game has looked awfully hard to watch this year.
Yeah.
I'll say that much.
It is.
But
Lamar's throwing game.
They're working in Gus Edwards, and he was much better than J.K. Dobbins this week, right? And was it Dobbins the week before had one attempt for 34, something silly? They look like, on the outside, it looks like they're trying to keep their running backs happy. That's what it looks like to me, because if you had Ingram last year, who was one of the better running backs in the league, with Lamar Jackson and what they did, now you're throwing in Edwards and obviously they spent a bit of capital on Dobbins. It looks like they're trying to be nice in saying, yeah, we'll work you in, Dobbins. We'll get you there, but then not. It's really hard to watch at the moment, and I think that's been a reason for like why they look so un-2019 Baltimore Ravens like. I don't like what I've seen from their rush game this year. I think it's been pretty bad, and obviously Ingram being out, he's got an ankle injury, right? So we'll see how that looks. That split with Edwards and Dobbins over the next week or so if Ingram does sit out some time. But at the same point, it's hard to trust anyone in that Ravens backfield, I think.
I think Edwards averaged 1.9 yards per carry, but he had a touchdown to save your fantasy season.
And Edwards is going to do that as well, isn't he? He's going to do that. And
he's going to be on the goal line going in.
Yeah.
But okay, we'll go back to the Bills game.
Well, and just to quickly touch on the Ravens, I do think an absence. I mean, yes, the addition of Dobbins may be changing the running backs getting into rhythm now because of that. But I think an absence of Marshall Yonda looms huge. I mean,
we spoke about that last week.
Basically an annual All-Pro at guard. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. The rare offensive lineman that has a chance at a first ballot Hall of Famer, perhaps even maybe overstating a little. But I think the fact that he retired. A lot of the talk around the Baltimore is, they'll still be fine. They've got Ronnie Staley, the tackles, the center Sraka, I think he was going to come back healthy. I know he missed the end of the season in the playoff games, and that was actually maybe a big factor there, losing your center so late, and the offensive line adjustments, maybe especially against a good defense like the Titans, where that is so important. That I think they maybe got a little exploited there. But the talk was, okay, yeah, they'll be fine without Yonda, but I do wonder if maybe we're seeing the pass protection seems fine. In fact, maybe even better than it was last year. But the run game, maybe that losing your again Hall of Fame guard might actually be a detriment there.
Yeah.
Now to get to the Bills game, our cohort at Going for Two, Jay, he will be hosting that Thursday night game we were referencing earlier. That'll be fun. Giants, Eagles, Jay and Dan. That'll be interesting. Can't wait to hear that. But Jay wants to hear from us about the return of Moss and how much that affects Singletary.
I think that with Yeldon out, so Yeldon got 6-7 carries last week. Moss coming in, I think he'll probably get like 6 carries. They're averaging 3.8 yards a carry. Like I said, they're not really doing that well. I can see them sharing the load, but playing the Chiefs, this is going to be a game where Allen's going to throw. I mean, he's going to pass a lot, and Singletary isn't really involved in the passing game. So I think that's where Moss is going to vulture some of what may or could have been Singletary's fantasy value is targeting. He's going to be probably out targeting Singletary.
Yeah, we saw when Buffalo had Moss and Singletary in the start of the year, it looked like on those short yardage and red zone work, it was Moss. He was the guy that they were going to as well. So from what we saw, I think even Moss had a receiving touchdown week 1 or week 2. I can't remember, it was a while back. But if that's how it's going to be, it's going to be, again, Singletary between the 20s. He might have seen a little bit more work with Moss while he was out, but I don't think it really – Singletary looked all right without Moss. It's just going to go back to that, I would assume, how it looked those first 2 weeks. So it's not going to be great. However, I think everyone had that expectation week 1, week 2 when that was happening anyway. So I think your window to sell Singletary has shut momentarily, depending on health of everyone. But, I don't think anyone's overly excited. Obviously, if the weather affects the game this week, it could be played more on the ground, more dump-offs, whatnot. So that could be something that helps both Singletary and Moss. And maybe even Josh Allen, he might not throw it as much or as often as he does this week. He might even rush it as well. So we'll see how that works.
I will say I actually kind of disagree with you a bit, Gladys. I don't think that Moss will eat into Singletary's targets. I mean, he does have 22 targets on the season. That's only one less than John Brown. John Brown's also played one less game. But, okay, well, compared to him and Cole Beasley, 22 targets for Singletary, Beasley 30 targets, right? So, that it does seem like Singletary is kind of that established number 4 target, especially when a guy like Dawson Knox will be out, maybe another target over the middle. I kind of agree with what you're saying, Dan. I think it's the red zone work. Yeah. Singletary started to get more red zone carries. They're kind of giving him that opportunity, and he wasn't really succeeding. It seems like that was one area where they never really wanted to trust him. They've kind of been forced to because Moss has been out. But I do expect Moss is going to come back and at the very least be the goal line back. Only 4 targets in 2 games. Doesn't seem like he's overly involved. One of his targets was for a touchdown. It was actually a receiving touchdown. So again, I believe that was a red zone target. So once they get close to the end zone, they're going to put Moss on, and it seems like they're comfortable at least throwing the ball in that area. But we haven't really seen Moss get targets in between the 20s to my memory. So I think Singletary will maintain that. And against the Chiefs, I actually do like that role for Singletary probably better than Moss this week. So if you're choosing between the two, I'd lean Singletary, just knowing that he's not sure of Moss' health exactly, obviously healthy enough to be active, but if he's still not 100%, I'd rather go with the healthier guy who is getting targets.
I think they're both very much flex-worthy at this point because you're playing for upside, aren't you? But we're talking about, at this point, Devin Singletary, he's at 11.8 points per game, RB 29. He's what, 3 points less than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and at the RB 2021. So we can hate usage for Singletary all we like, or Moss all we like, but the reality is that they're not too far off what the guy they're facing this week is doing on a points per game basis either. So that's something to keep note of too.
So back to more talk of the Monday night game overall. Again, we mentioned Chiefs by 6. I know maybe we're a little hesitant to take the Chiefs. Obviously, our friend Izzy Ortiz here is saying he's willing to take the Chiefs and the over on the points, so over 56. Pat Mahomes will have a field day, apparently. So would definitely be quite an entertaining matchup. Mahomes versus the Bills defense. I think again, there's a reason both teams are 4-1. Both teams are playoff teams last year, kind of looking like they both will be again. So this might not be the only time they meet this year either.
I've said it before, and I'll say it over and over again. I still think the Bills are pretenders. I have said it enough times to believe it. We saw last week another team put over 30 points on them. So, yeah, within reason, I think Mahomes can absolutely go ham because if you're copying up 30 points to teams like Tennessee or the Rams or someone like that, and you now have Patrick Mahomes off a loss, they could well get battered this week. It's very much on the cards. At the same time, the Bills might also look to rebound as well after that loss too. So, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but we'll see how much Mahomes does. And what over-under at this point is 307.5. for his passing yards.
Also, it is going well. Thank you for asking. Phase _lean 2. Wow. Lean 2 going for 2. Appreciate the support on Twitch. So another surprise, again, we talked about Gladys being surprised at Josh Allen's improvement. I was quite surprised in Stefan Diggs. And I didn't think that was a connection that would be quite apparent right off the bat. So, I mean, he was someone, on 17 fantasy teams, I have 0 shares of Stefan Diggs, and that's looking like a massive regret because is he the number 1 overall wide receiver right now? I guess it depends on scoring setting. It certainly is locked in at the top 5, it seems, at this point.
I can go through an easy blind comparison for you. I set this one up specifically for you, Kyle. This one specifically for you. Player 8, 5 games, 51, 36, 509, and 2. Wide receiver 8, 19.8 points per game, 98.9 points total. Player B, 6 games, 49, 32, 415, and 7. Wide receiver 2, 19.8 points per game, 119 points overall. This is all PPR. Player C, 6 games, 36, 28, 537, and 3. Wide receiver 5, 17 points per game, 101.7 points. Which one is which? This is all going to tie into what you're going with, but we'll get there.
Well, I did. So, obviously one of them has to be Diggs, right?
One of them's only played 5 games, so I think that's a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I was looking at the team targets for the Bills, and I did notice that Diggs, it was at 51 targets. So looking like Diggs is wide receiver 8 right now.
Diggs is the wide receiver 8. Wide receiver 2 would be who?
Who has 7 touchdowns? Yeah, that's feel free to guess, Gladys. Any of our listeners, of course, enter your guesses in as well. Who's the wide receiver 2 right now with 7 receiving touchdowns?
DeAndre?
Our mate Adam Thielen.
Calvin? Oh, Adam Thielen.
His former cohort in Minnesota, who would play as CB. Wide receiver 5. So 3 places higher than Diggs.
Slightly more yards and 1 touchdown. Who's been more efficient? Yeah. Is it Calvin Ridley?
Calvin Ridley, I think, is the wide receiver 1 at this point.
Okay.
No, maybe that's Hopkins. I've got to double check. But the wide receiver 5 in fantasy for PPR wide receivers is? Any guesses?
Well,
Nope.
That was my guess.
That would be Justin Jefferson.
Wow.
So we're looking at a point where, as well as Diggs has done extremely well, all 3 things can exist. The Vikings have done extremely well without him.
At least the passing offense has done extremely well without him.
And Diggs has done extremely well without them too.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I wasn't touching Diggs either unless it was in best ball because I don't want to deal with that on a week-by-week basis. But if you're talking about 18, 19 points a game, he's equal to the wide receiver 2 on 1 less games. So he's putting up that 20 points per week with Diggs. So that's
see where he ranks after tonight.
There you go. So as I said, he's sitting there and
yeah,
you're right. I think everyone kind of bounced on Diggs. Everyone knows what that talent is, and you were right to bring it up when we were talking about today's show. Until I saw this, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he was the wide receiver 8. I wouldn't have even thought about
it. Nothing. I mean, this does slightly relate to what we're talking about. I did guess Calvin Ridley as one of my guesses, so we'll talk about that. It doesn't relate to tonight's game, but Josh Kalu wants to know, should he trade Michael Thomas for Calvin Ridley and Le'Veon Bell? Half point PPR.
If this is redraft, yes, I would, because I'm all in on what Calvin Ridley is doing, and you're getting Le'Veon Bell in a world where running backs are dropping like flies. So I would take that. I would likely take that. And I know we talk about, look, Michael Thomas could come back and be a league winner, but he could very well end up being a top 5 receiver at the end of the year. But we're talking about a guy who already is a top 5 receiver as well in Calvin Ridley. So I would feel okay with that. It depends who your other running backs are as well. I think that's also another thing as well that you want to look at. If we're talking about Le'Veon Bell walking in and being the receiving back for Kansas, I think that also has its benefits too. But I would probably do that purely because Bell is going to add some form of value. That's why I think Ridley and Thomas. If it's just redraft, I'd probably do it because I want to win. Dynasty might be a different story.
Yeah, in Dynasty, it'd be hesitant to move Thomas just for this, simply because it appears that he's going to be coming back this week. So it's not as if you're trading him away, giving up zero production. You're giving away Michael Thomas production, which now that you're coming off the bye week, he's had a few weeks off, presuming to be healthy coming into week 7. Dynasty, I don't think I would do this. But
Dynasty, probably not.
But if we're talking redraft, I do like what you're saying, Dan. The fact that Bell has value, and even in a redraft league, if you want to take him just to bank Calvin Ridley and then try and flip Bell for something else, that also works. I know redraft trades tend to not happen as easily as Dynasty trades, so it may not be necessarily something to bank on. But I mean, running back depth is always so important in any league format. So if you're getting the extra running back here, I also think this depends on, as someone who has Michael Thomas on your team, do you feel good about the depth on your team? By taking a 2-for-1, do you have a very clear player to drop, or are you dropping good players and suddenly you're not just giving up Michael Thomas, you're also losing another good depth option just to get Le'Veon Bell, who is still a maybe at this point. So I think team context, this is really close. I can see why you're asking us. This is no easy answer here. Gladys, how would you approach this?
I would like to know who his other running backs are, but if it's redraft, the Chiefs got Le'Veon Bell, I think, for his passing and for his goal line. CEH isn't getting into the end zone, so I would do it. I think Calvin Ridley is a good. Calvin Ridley and Le'Veon for Michael Thomas is a good trade in redraft, because Michael Thomas, he's Michael Thomas, of course, but he hasn't played this year that much, except that one game where he got hurt, and Drew is getting comfortable with his other wide receivers, and there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. I depending on who his other.
Well, we know now his 3 other running backs appear to be Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, and Miles Sanders. Yeah, if you're really just running those 3, I'd want to. Especially with it looks like Sanders is hurt.
Yeah, Sanders got hurt. Mixon got hurt too, but he came back in. He has a good running back stable though going there.
I might do it just to get that extra depth at RB. Get that 4th guy in there, and that way, if Sanders or Mixon does miss time, you're not panicking. You don't have to go stream off the waiver wire. Bell should be in a good offense. So redraft, I do it. Dynasty, I wouldn't make this trade.
It's not a bad ad. It's not a bad ad with Bell. Do you really want to be that guy or girl dropping 60% of your fab on Giovanni Bernard or Corey Clement?
Yeah, true.
At some point, you have to work with quality over circumstance, and Bell is probably, obviously with Damian Williams opting out, that's a big difference for Kansas. Obviously, that was where the hype for Hilaire was. And now we're talking about a world where Bell is going to probably step into some form of a role because that's what they will do. And they obviously see something that's not right with Hilaire or a way to support him or add depth for the year. I'd be surprised if Bell doesn't play a role straight away. He'll get his work. And why wouldn't he? He's finally healthy. He shook that hamstring work off, and he's going to have PPR value or half PPR value to an extent. So if you have Mixon, who has had an injury here or there, and Sanders, who could be done for a while, it's not a bad play to make, especially if you know that Calvin Ridley, whether or not Julio Jones is about or not, is going to have massive, massive weeks consistently. So I would feel fairly comfortable with that. Although, again, redraft, yes. Dynasty, probably not.
Anyway, so thank you, Josh, for tuning in and asking a good question to get us this discussion going. Another question here from Braxton. Also needs Tyreek to get him 30 points, and I think freshly traded him on a newly acquired piece. It's always fun to play those right after a trade. James Robinson and Tyler Lockett for Tyreek Hill and Antonio Gibson. This is another one where I think this really does depend on format. If this is Dynasty, I think this is a steal. I get James Robinson has a lot of value right now, but as a UDFA on a team that's probably likely going through a ton of changes, his role is not secure for next year. Antonio Gibson's the piece that Washington drafted. Yes, maybe underused this year, but I think if you're looking just at those running backs, it's dynasty-wise, it sways so far on Gibson's side. And you get Tyreek Hill over Tyler Lockett. I know Tyler Lockett's doing great right now. I don't think he's past Tyreek Hill as a dynasty asset. Maybe as a redraft asset, they're probably right there. But I think this is smash the Tyreek Gibson side in dynasty. So assuming it's redraft, because I think that's where the interesting discussion is, this is really close to me. I might actually lean the Robinson Lockett side in redraft just because Lockett has been so consistent this year. And Robinson's the guy in Jacksonville. Again, is that happening in 2021? Not sure, but in redraft, you don't really care. Gibson has been struggling. So to me, this all comes down to format. I think it's closer in redraft, but it's definitely to one side in dynasty. How do you both feel about this trade?
I like the trade. I don't trust Washington's offense. I don't trust Jacksonville's offense either, but I trust them a little bit more than I trust Washington. I think Robinson is getting a little bit more fill time. And Tyler Lockett, if it's redraft, I like it a lot. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are who's going to get all the passes? They're going to get all the catches. But he's already made this trade, right? This is a trade he's already done.
Yes, this looks like just talking about value.
Okay. He just wants to validate himself. Is that what's going on? You did good. You did good, Bronson. That's if it's redraft, you did really good. I think you fleeced someone. Is that a home league? I'm asking. I wonder. You can answer. You can tell me.
Yeah, we'd like to join this league. I think is what Gladys is saying.
Yeah.
Brixton does have a question though for us. So more trade talk. This is time of year, right? Should he trade they trade Dalvin Cook and T.Y. Hilton for Keenan Allen and Miles Sanders?
Oh.
I guess both running backs are hurt right now. So,
did he ever tell us? He never said what kind of league it is, right?
Yeah, nothing about redraft or dynasty.
So we're going to assume it's redraft. Dalvin Cook and T.Y. Hilton for Keenan. So he's getting Keenan Allen and Miles Sanders.
It would appear that way, yeah. The way it poses appears he's trying to see if trading away Cook and Hilton.
You wouldn't think this is redraft.
No,
you wouldn't think anyone's trading Miles Sanders in redraft right now.
And
you'd have to be living under a rock to be accepting a trade for Miles Sanders if he's done his ACL.
Well,
if he's out,
it sounds like it's not ACL. I think they're worried about meniscus, which is still could potentially be a long term anyway. You're probably right. This probably is a dynasty.
8 weeks.
Because I also think
if it's an 8 week injury, that's week 14, and if Philly's season is over, which it very well could be. You've just traded away Dalvin Cook, who could be back.
That division, though.
Yeah, well,
that's the only thing you can bank on is that division's so bad that their season, no one's season's probably over.
We can get to that a little bit later, but if Dalvin Cook's going to be back in the next couple of weeks, so Sanders out only 1 to 2 weeks. Well,
reported this afternoon is what Jay is saying. So I know a lot of the talk was around it that he avoided any ACL tear. It was really just how bad did he tear his meniscus? It seems like it's the question.
Depends when's Philly's bye week as well, if they work that in, and obviously the Giants they have the Giants on the short week as well. So even if he misses 2 games, he's going to miss 2 games pretty quickly. So, geez, I don't know. Dalvin Cook, it's clear to see what Alexander Mattison wasn't without Cook. So I would just flat out cut T.Y. Hilton and roll with Dalvin Cook, and I wouldn't even blink otherwise. Keenan Allen's going to do fine. I'd try and find a way to get Allen in anyway because Allen's been fantastic with Herbert, I think. But knee injuries, meniscus, and on a short turnaround, I got to be honest with you, I'm not interested in that at all.
It does, yeah. I mean, from a redraft perspective, Cook is the best asset, right? So if this is redraft, you probably want just that best asset, even if he's out. But if this is dynasty, assuming this isn't significant to Miles Sanders' career in terms of his athleticism and really affecting that, I'd probably rather have Sanders, the younger guy, still in his rookie contract, than Cook. And I'd definitely rather have Keenan Allen than T.Y. Hilton, who, I mean, unless they get a real quarterback or they play their real quarterback who's their backup, it does look like Hilton's suffering because of Phillip Rivers' play. I know he threw some touchdowns last week, but just not to Hilton. So it does seem like that's one connection that hasn't happened, whereas Keenan Allen seems like he's fine with Justin Herbert. So if this is dynasty, I would do this.
Sanders looks fantastic. I'm not saying that he doesn't. I'm just saying that knee injuries and short turnaround recoveries is something that I'm personally not overly interested in. And if Cook gets back within the same time frame, I think one-on-one, I know who I'd prefer. That's all. I think I'd prefer Cook over Sanders. and that would be in redraft or dynasty, to be honest with you. I think I'd still probably lean Cook at this point. But T.Y. Hilton has been absolutely poor guy. Poor guy. He needs Jameis Winston in his life.
The only reason I would take Sanders over Cook is because Philly has nothing else except the new wide receiver, but their wide receiving core is down. Sanders is going to be a focal point of that offense. Cook should be the focal point, but Minnesota is just like trash right now. I mean, seriously, they couldn't even put points up on Atlanta, and I know that was Madison, but still, I would do that. I would take Sanders, and Keenan Allen is the most targeted player on that Chargers offense right now, and Herbert looks for him all the time. So if it's a PPR, I would take Allen and Sanders.
Again, I agree. Minnesota is trash. You guys know very much how much I feel about that. However, we just went over it before. You've got the wide receiver 2 and the wide receiver 5 on that roster. Like that's a real thing too. And before Cook got injured, Dalvin Cook was the running back 2 as well. So that's all in PPR. So
it's not dynasty; it's a PPR format.
Oh no, I'm just saying in PPR.
Yeah, dynasty PPR.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
Oh, not dynasty, but it is redraft. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just saying in full PPR, you've got a team that's got the RB2, the wide receiver 2, and the wide receiver 5. So like as trash as Minnesota are, because they are producing fantasy players.
It's because the trashness is all in the defense, right? Like it's.
Yeah.
And they have been getting better. Certainly looked good the first half against Seattle, but it's a lot of rookies, a lot of new faces. This is not the same defense that was last year. So I definitely was on the expectation that Kirk Cousins wouldn't only throw 440 times like he did last year. His first year in Minnesota, he threw the ball 632 times. So I figured it would at least kind of get in the middle there somewhere, but it does seem maybe closer to that 600 extreme this year. One more question, not a trade. It appears a sit-start question from Fib. We're not going to lie to you here. Chase Edmonds or John Brown? Because it's against the Chiefs and because the expectation is the Bills are going to have to throw a lot to keep up, I'm saying John Brown.
I'm going to lean Chase Edmonds. I think Dallas is absolute trash, and I think they're at that point where they're allowing even Devontae Freeman to score 100 yards and a touchdown. That's the world that Dallas is in. They let the Giants O-line bully them, and Devontae Freeman to have 100-odd yards and a touchdown last week. That happened. And Edmonds has looked pretty solid in PPR. He's looked solid in that red zone usage with targets. We went over this last week. John Brown, I have John Brown. You guys know there's not many John Brown truthers out there like me. I'm a big fan of his work. But when he's hurt, he's hurt. And I've seen enough donuts over the past 2 weeks from John Brown to want to just give him a week and see how that goes. And again, like it's a short week for that. I'd rather give him a week to see what he does.
That's fair. Yeah, the injury concern. Without the injury concern, would you go Brown though?
In this matchup, no. I still prefer Edmonds. I'm starting Edmonds over Brown in another league as well.
Okay.
I'm rolling that way because I'm not a big Kenyon Drake person either. I think Edmonds is starting to slowly get more work, and yeah, look. There's no doubt that Buffalo could be playing catch-up in this one, and that's good for John Brown. But at the same point, I think I'm going to take the 10 carries from from Edmonds, and the 3 to 4 receptions that he's going to take as well. I'm going to roll that way. I like to live dangerously, though.
I would go Edmonds, only because if Buffalo's playing catch-up, I think that he concentrates more on Cole Beasley than he does John Brown. 2, Dallas's defense is like 30th in rushing yards that they give to the running backs. And Edmonds is on the field not only for rushing, but he's also out targeting Drake. So I think he will have the play. I think that Edmonds is a higher ceiling and a lower floor. So I would go Edmonds on this one. Also.
All right. And just to back to Brixton, he'd be able to start Aaron Jones and Chris Carson while Miles Sanders is out. So I think that the upgraded receiver going from Hilton to Allen does make that worth it.
He has Aaron Jones and Chris Carson and Miles Sanders in one league?
Well, he's got Dalvin Cook. He's trying to trade for Miles Sanders, I think. That's still
Aaron Jones and Chris Carson. Those are his running backs.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't. So then the question is, then it stands question. So you're not really trading for a running back, you're trading for the wide receiver because his running backs are stacked. I mean, he doesn't, he's going to depth maybe.
And if that's the case, if you can bring in, listen, if your running backs are stacked and you think you can bring in Keenan Allen for T.Y. Hilton, you'd do it.
Yeah,
exactly. If your running backs weren't as stacked, it'd be a different story. But there we go. Dallas is allowed 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 most rushing attempts to the running back. That is Dallas.
Okay.
And, yeah, they're struggling on that front. And 5 rushing touchdowns. They have also – they're not too bad against passing backs. But I'd still probably lean Edmonds at this point. Until Brown's healthy, that's where I would go. Sorry to go back to that.
I mean, that's fine. So, yeah, I'm still on the Team Brown here, but it looks like co-hosts have outnumbered me 2-1 on Chase Edmonds. So if you're tallying, that's the score there. Again, banking on Edmonds scoring against the Dallas defense, which to be fair, is actually probably a good bet that game will be high scoring. More Dallas talk here. Talk about Gallup in this trade. So William Hanby wants to know, trade away Adams and Gibson for CMC and Gallup. I'm assuming this is Devontae Adams and Antonio Gibson. And then, McCaffrey and Gallup.
Gibson for Christmas. No, I wouldn't do that trade. If it's a redraft, I wouldn't do that trade. No. I think Devontae Adams doesn't taking yesterday's game out of the equation. When is CMC supposed to be back? Week 7, week 8?
I mean, theoretically, he could come back at any time. So I think it's been the IR now officially, I believe.
He's got a 3-week period from there, right?
Yeah, I guess he's still on the IR right now, but he's eligible to be taken off, and I think they have to start him within 3 weeks, or else he's gone for the season. And I mean, the way their season's going, when they're staying competitive, you got to think they're probably going to push to have him back, right? So I think he has to start practicing week 9, I think, or I guess has to start practicing before week 8.
Sounds about right.
I think he has to start practicing before week 8 because he was at the 3 weeks, because it was he got put on IR just before week 3. So 3 weeks I did just this past week. So I guess technically it's before week 9 he has to practice. So, but that's only practice. I mean, they can play him whenever. So it really is tough to know. And I think that's where you're leaning that way, right, Gladys? Adams' bye week's gone. Yeah, they just played a tough defense in the Buccaneers. They play the Texans defense next, which has definitely been more vulnerable. And then the Vikings after, who we torched a few weeks ago. 49ers haven't been the same. So, in fact, Adams, again, already passed his bye week. Seems like he's healthy. I don't want to say he was 100% himself in that game, but that could also be rust more than injury. I think in redraft it would be scary to try and go after CMC. And I don't think Gallup has been all that consistent to the point where, that's that great of a grab. You may even prefer to have Gibson for the ceiling there. And in that case, that it's, redraft, I think, pretty easily to stick. Now, if we're talking dynasty, Adams is 27, and the way CMC has played, it seems as though there is maybe some longevity to his game. Although we're saying this, he's on IR right now, so maybe not. But pass catcher, right? Not his game isn't always built on running through the tackles. So if it's dynasty, I would probably do this to get a potential top 5 dynasty asset in CMC. But if it's redraft, I would stick.
Did you see that his starting running backs are Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon?
Yeah. So again, one of those things where you can, but I suppose you can pay off the waiting time for CMC waiting with those two. It's just, again, with that is, I don't know that, unlike the other trade where, the upgrade from T.Y. Hilton up to Keenan Allen was massive.
Obvious. Yeah, it's obvious.
Antonio Gibson to Michael Gallup, I'm not even sure if that's the upgrade. They're both kind of inconsistent. Antonio Gibson has that running back attached to him, which you may almost prefer to have at depth. So I think redraft, I would probably again stick with what you have in Adams and Gibson, but dynasty, I'll make this trade to get CMC.
Gibson is very hard with dynasty. We see how Washington are at this point, and how they're going to be you feel like they're going to be a completely different team next year. That's the thing. Like, Haskins bombed after 5-6 weeks, unfortunately. Like, I wish he did better, but Kyle Allen isn't the answer, and Alex Smith probably is going to ride the year out. Like, we're talking about a team that could well have maybe Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, something like that. They could be down that path. You want to pair up Antonio Gibson in a passing game with Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields? I probably do. So Gibson's one, if you have him, if I have him as well, you're probably going to have to ride him out for the year if it's in Dynasty as well. I can see why people – I think we all have the answer on how they were going to use him. He's going to be that running back, and I think they have their answer in that, and I can see why people might want to sell out on him as well. That's a really tough one. But if you have Henry and Mixon, if you feel like you can get an upgrade somewhere, I wouldn't hold back. But at the same time, I'd probably lean the same way Kyle does as well. And Gladys, I'll probably do that.
All right. So one thing we want to talk about, again, the second Monday night game being the Cardinals-Cowboys, although we have talked a little bit about it. But again, getting some odds from BUSR. Once again, BUSR.com/going-for-2 to get that 20% bonus offer when joining. Oh boy!
After dark. Here we go.
Yeah. This was not that late. So, bonus offer 20%. BUSR.com/going-for-2. Do that. Bet on it. You can bet on me messing up somewhere too. Odds of that game. So the over/under is 55.5. Right now it looks like it's a pick'em. I think at one point the Cardinals were a 1 point, maybe even up to a 1.5 point favorites.
Cardinals were favorites about an hour ago. 2 hours ago, I checked in and made the change, but they were 1 point favorite then. And the pick'em has been like that for about 24 hours at this point.
Okay. Okay, so some quick. Oh, actually, one more question.
Sorry. Pick'em just came in. Cardinals were favorites for about 24 hours by a point.
Yeah. Anyway, so do I hang on to Aaron Rodgers now?
Why wouldn't you?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, he's got a great matchup coming up against the Texans. I thought this was the toughest defense they've played all year.
Buccaneers,
or at least up to this point.
Yeah, they're decent. The Bucs do.
I know they've got the Colts. I mean, they got the 49ers week 9, the Colts maybe a week or two after that, and then week 16 against the Titans. So there are, that's a fantasy championship key tough matchup there. But I think for the most part, Rodgers has some you'll be much better defensive matchups than what was faced here. The defensive line really, I mean, the Packers offensive line was number 1 in a lot of stats going into this week. They won't be anymore. That's for sure.
All right. Yeah.
I wouldn't overreact to this performance.
Didn't they? They lost a guy from Colorado on the offensive line.
Bakhtiari got hurt. But again, they were struggling to protect even with him in the game. So still no word on how long that's going to be. Could maybe be tricky against the Texans, although I did think Bobby Wagner didn't look horrible playing left tackle. I don't know if that's if they going into a week, if that's how they're going to approach it. I'm not sure. But yeah, I would hang on to Rodgers. He's saying he also had Dak, right? So losing Dak, who
else is out there? If you've lost Dak, that's a tough one because if you're saying that I've lost Dak, I have Rodgers, is this Superflex 2 QB, 1 QB? Is it a 15, 16 team league? Like that's a tough one because Rodgers might be your best option, or you're going to the waiver wire trying to find Nick Foles. Like this is the world you could be living in. So yeah, I mean, of course, hang on to Rodgers. I mean, this is a guy that was putting up massive numbers without Devontae Adams, and now he gets him back, and they just ran into a tough matchup against the Bucs. I think they're going to have very much better games ahead. You think about how we've spoken about it before. The Vikings are terrible, but he's going to play them again. Points are going to be had. The Titans, I've said it before, they're giving up 30-odd points a game as well. Just gave up, another 36 to the Texans.
True.
So, even if that's week 16, the Titans can be had. They're going to get those guys. Rodgers is going to be fine. And, I don't see why you would be, unless you can find, unless you feel like there's an absolute way you can upgrade at a position, why wouldn't you be playing Aaron Rodgers? Is this Dynasty redraft? That's a tough one. Dynasty, hey, if you're here to win now, keep Rodgers. Play him. He's playing well.
This is PPR. This is he said not Dynasty, it's PPR.
Yeah, assuming it's the same league he's talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, what else is out there that's better? That's the thing. We're talking about 6 weeks into the year. Teams are getting hammered on COVID. You're looking at ways where bye teams are coming in. Rodgers has had his bye. He's going to be starting for you for the next 10, 11 weeks. Why I wouldn't be worried about Aaron Rodgers at this point.
again, maybe if you really want to try and stream some quarterback options, again, maybe week 9, they play the short week, Thursday night, traveling to San Francisco. I could see maybe why like to avoid that one. The Colts defense has been tough, but Joe Burrow and the Bengals almost put 30 points on them, right? So are they really that good of a defense, or have they just had such a great schedule? So yeah, I think, hang on to Rodgers, and if you really don't want to play him a certain week, try and stream quarterbacks for that particular week, but I think you have to hang on to him. Because think of it this way: if you drop Aaron Rodgers, he's not staying as a free agent. Someone will pick him up, and someone will put him on their team and maybe use them against you, and that'll be the worst feeling of all. So,
the 49ers defense didn't Fitzpatrick put on like
yeah,
point? Yeah, so
not as scary without Nick Bosa.
You're good. You're good. You'll be okay.
We're talking about the difference within a week. Aaron Rodgers after weeks 1 to 5, quarterback 9. After week 6, quarterback 16. That's the difference a week can make with the quarterback. So if you're looking at that, I understand why someone's looking at that going, hey, maybe this isn't great, but
1 week.
Yeah, 1 week. He dropped 7 spots after a week, and on a points per game basis, he's the quarterback 6. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. Rodgers isn't. If this is redraft, then I don't think. And listen, what happened to Dak Prescott? We all haven't caught up since then. What happened to Dak was absolutely terrible, right? Like, this is brutal. But if you had both of them on your roster this year, you've done something right as well.
Yeah. So
two top 6 quarterbacks.
The problem. And like next week, they said they're playing Houston, who is defense is 32nd in the rushing yards, 26 in points allowed. They can be had. He's going to be fine.
All right, so some quick hit over-unders here. Talk about the Cowboys-Cardinals game. So, Dan, thanks for finding these for us. So halftime total is 26.5. And again, it's 55.5 for the total game. Cardinals team total is 27.5 for the whole game. And total touchdowns in the game at 5.5. So just look at those three. So the halftime total of 26.5, Cardinals team total of 27.5, and then 5.5 touchdowns total. Are there either any of those three that you're all feeling pretty confident in?
If I can, I would think, how well do you think Andy Dalton's going to adapt right away? Because if we think he's going to struggle that first half, just to find his groove to start a game, that under might be a little shaky. But we're talking about Dallas here, and everything with Dallas screams overs. So I'm okay with over, and over.
I think the Cardinals team total over of 27.5, I think is definitely attainable. That's the one I would probably gravitate towards, just to get banking on the poor Dallas defense, which isn't suddenly going to get better out of the blue.
Anything against the Dallas Cowboys defense, I like over. Plus, they're playing inside, and the Cardinals are typically a faster team inside. So I expect Murray to, I would go over on the Cardinals total so
far. So a couple passing yards, pretty close on both. Kyler Murray at 287.5, Andy Dalton at 289.5. Is there either you feel more comfortable in?
I would go under on Kyler Murray. I think he's going to have more running. I think he's going to do more running than passing. Although Andy Dalton, I would go under too. I don't.
Both teams could run the football a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they could. Although Kyler Murray hasn't really. It's like the whole Lamar Jackson thing. Neither of them have been the runners that we thought they would be, getting the rushing yards. And Kyler Murray didn't have a really good game. Was it last week or the week before that he was handled quite easily?
Wasn't it the Panthers game last week?
Sounds like that, yeah.
So, but this is Dallas's defense,
but they had the Jets last week. It was the Panthers 2 weeks ago, I think.
2 weeks ago. There we go.
I'm going over on Kyler Murray on rushing. Wait, was it rushing yards or passing yards?
Passing, yeah.
I'm going over on passing.
I think I want to say Kyler Murray's rushing yards was at about 40.5, if I remember correctly. It was about 40.5 for Kyler Murray rushing.
I'm going over on that too.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
He has 296 rushing yards on the season.
Yeah.
So, it's 59.2 per game.
So
yeah, I think I feel more comfortable in that over than his passing yards.
How many? Let's see.
I'm actually looking at his game log right now just to see how often he's reached that over on passing.
So he passed for 380 yards last week but it was the Jets. So
yeah, and 286 against Washington week 2. But even that's under. So just the only time he's reached over that 287 has been against the Jets. So yeah.
And we're hoping that Andy Dalton can push the game to a point where Murray has to throw
the ball. Exactly.
Yeah. It's almost like you want to pick those two together, right? You're going to pick both of them over or both of them under.
Right. I'm going to go both over.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at this point this could be a very high-scoring game. As I've put in here as well, Arizona's given up 3 receiving touchdowns to running backs as well. So I think everyone's worried that Andy Dalton's going to swing this more towards, or Mike McCarthy's going to swing this more towards Zeke Elliott. I think you're right. So I think Zeke could be having that big game, and if he does get that receiving work, I think that's going to elevate Dalton in that regard. So I'm more inclined to lean Dalton over. And Murray is going to get close. I think he is going to go under.
So speaking of Elliott, we'll talk running backs now. So we've got a few, again, Dan, thanks for pulling these out. Drake rush yards at 59.5. Chase Edmonds, 3.5 total receptions and 21.5 receiving yards. Ezekiel Elliott, 89.5 for rush yards, 4.5 receptions, 30.5 receiving yards.
Chase Edmonds, I would go over on both of those.
Yeah.
Edmonds could do 21.5 off 1 reception.
Yeah.
That's very well.
That's attainable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Drake, I'm just waiting for them to pull him. So I'm going to go under.
I still lean Drake on over on that one because we saw Dallas legitimately made Devonta Freeman look like a superstar. So, and Wayne Gorman as well. So, well, I think Drake will hit the overs. I think Drake's going to have a nice game as well this week. I think he's going to do well.
He hasn't been horrible from a fantasy perspective. He hasn't been scoring touchdowns and he hasn't been catching passes. Those are two things we want all running backs to do, right? But 3.7 yards a carry, it's not atrocious, right? I mean, Chase Edmonds is obviously doing better in that regard, 5 yards a carry, but he's also getting much less carries, not even a quarter of what Drake has had so far.
Edmonds is like what 3 or 4 to 1, like targets over Drake, right? So that's also happening too. So
basically 4 to 1, yeah.
Yeah, I think Drake's going to have a nice game this week. I think he's going to be very much in play because everyone's in play against Dallas, and I think he is very well going to be. That's 60 yards. 60 yards over 60 yards. I think Drake can do that. Yes, because if I feel like Kyler Murray's going to hit the unders, I think that's going to move the needle somewhere else, and I think that could be Drake. I think he could have a nice game on the ground, but again, he's been unlucky. He's in that top half of like rushing attempts. He's there. He's getting the work in the rush work. It's just, Cliff Kingsbury warned everyone that Chase Edmonds was going to get his work too, and I don't think anyone really believed him. And he has. That's happened.
And looking at trends, only one game this season, Drake has failed to reach 60 yards rushing. It's 35 against the Panthers.
Yeah.
But every game it's been, I mean, he's just hitting that mark, like 60 against the 49ers, 60 last week against the Jets. But
we're talking Dallas.
He's more likely to, I think he's more likely to hit that than Kyler Murray is to hit his passing over under. And again, I think, so Gladys, one thing you mentioned, take Edmonds on both receptions and receiving yards. Obviously that correlates well. Are we thinking the same thing with Zeke at 4.5 receptions, 30.5 receiving yards?
4.5 receptions, 30 receiving yards. When Dalton was with the Bengals, who was his running back?
Gio Bernard for a lot of it. So there's definitely a connection to a pass catcher there. I think Ben Jarvis.
There we go. Yeah. There's a name for it.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe that wasn't quite as coincidental. I know most of Dalton's career he had Gio Bernard and I think Jeremy Hill. So take that as well.
Oh wow, Jeremy Hill. He might have had Mixon for a year as well.
Yeah, that's true. At the end, yeah. I do wonder that again. First game starting, maybe the plan is okay. Let's get the ball to Zeke, and I kind of like him on over on most of that. 89.5 yards. I think he can reach 90 yards against the Cardinals defense. So I'd be willing to go. I think over on everything Elliott here. Mike McCarthy loves running backs.
Do you think they're going to play from behind, or do you think that Dallas is going to play from ahead for the whole game, for most of the game, for 3 quarters?
I could see this being very back and forth, like the lead's constantly changing.
Yeah.
So I think in that type of regard, I can see both teams, again, maybe trying to default to try and run the football, more control the clock.
Okay, I would go. I mean, just because he's Zeke, I would go over. Not anything to do with McCarthy or Dalton, but just because he's Zeke and they need a win, I would go over. And without Dak, he's their bell cow. I mean, so yeah, I would go over just for that reason.
I again lean on Arizona not being the best against passing down backs. If that's the case, I think Elliott will hit those receptions and yards, especially if they are chasing. 89 rush yards, 90 rush yards. I think Zeke can do that most weeks in his sleep. So I would feel fairly comfortable with that as well. And if they are competitive, that's great for Zeke. If they're chasing, that's great for Zeke. So and the other thing we got to look at as well, we're also talking about, Andy Dalton is he's more mobile than what people give him credit for. But the threat from 5-7 yards out was that Dak was always going to snipe Elliott, right? So,
I mean, yes, but Zeke also leads the league in carries inside the 5. So even with Dak scoring rushing touchdowns, he's got enough volume there to make that okay.
So Prescott was like 4 years straight of like 6 touchdowns, right? Rushing touchdowns. Yeah. I mean, now we know that's like we're going to line Zeke up for that anyway. Now that's just a little bit more of a cherry on top, but still, in this sort of circumstance, I tend to lean Elliott overs.
Yeah,
and I mean, this will be the first game I think Elliott plays without Dak, because I mean they both came in as rookies. So, was it Dak, or is it just because that's the talent of Zeke and that offensive line? Although not fully healthy either.
Right.
Anyway, let's get to some receivers now for some props here. So Michael Gallup and Christian Kirk both have 3.5 receptions as the over/under. Definitely highlighted that one there. So what do you both think? Is there either that seems like an obvious over on either, or are they both in that range? Like, what are you thinking about Gallup and Kirk again? Over/under 3.5 receptions.
Kirk, I would go over. Gallup, I bet he hits 3.5. I bet he hits 3. But Kirk was like, him and Hopkins and Fitz last week were tied for 7 targets. Gallup is working with a new quarterback, and he's working with CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Zeke, like we just talked about. So I trust that Dalton will seek him out? Not necessarily. So I would go over on Kirk and
almost a push
on Gallup.
Yeah, he is so inconsistent. And Dan alluded to it earlier. Against Dallas, go with the overs on everything, which in this case includes Christian Kirk. I'm going to assume both over on these. DeAndre Hopkins, 7.5 receptions and 88.5 receiving yards.
Smash.
It seems as though they want enough people to bet on the big players, so they don't ever put those totals too high. But against the Dallas defense, you got to think this is the 1 week where they couldn't have put this too high, right? Like but at 188 yards, you might still take the over.
So they've got what? They've got Kyler Murray for 287 passing yards. If you said DeAndre Hopkins for 320 receiving yards, I'd twitch at it.
They definitely take the over on Murray too.
Smash. 80, 88, 89 yards. Smash.
Yeah.
So again, CeeDee Lamb over under is at 60.5 receiving yards.
I'm sorry, 60.5?
60.5, yes. That's an interesting one.
I put that one in there because that one looked. It's almost like on the precipice of like, man, that almost feels too low for someone like Lamb. It almost feels too low, but 60.5, it's like Dalton kind of throws that into. It's just that spatter in there, isn't it? So 60.5. I think he hits. I think he hit 65. I think he hit 65 yards. 4 receptions. Yeah, I think he can hit.
When did Dak go out last game? Did he go out halftime? Was it first half or second half?
I feel like it was the third quarter.
Like the third quarter, so it was late?
Yeah.
60.5 for CeeDee Lamb.
He's
because
his first game, he only had 59 yards, and he's gotten over every game since. So
yeah, I would go yards after catch. He's going to get more than 60.5. Yes, I would go over there.
I'm going to go back to this. Is Dalton more of a guy that's going to throw it up and say, "Hey, go and get it," or is he going to try and put it in position? What do you think? Because if he's just going to throw YOLO, that 3.5 on Gallup looks awfully tempting. Because he did have that game-winning drive they had. It was the Gallup, and he went up and got it. And he brought it down 40-odd yards. Like if he can establish that with Gallup, that's awfully close.
Do you think Gallup is closer to a AJ Green model, or do you think CeeDee Lamb is closer?
I'm just saying, if Dalton's the guy that we think he is, that's just going to start slinging it about. I think that probably leans better for Gallup.
And I mean, I think Gallup does kind of play. If you're comparing the two, I think the way Gallup plays is closer to AJ Green style. CeeDee Lamb, it seems like he's been in the slot enough, which is also kind of good for him. In terms Dalton, a couple of years ago had a really good season with Tyler Boyd, especially.
Sure. But
we've seen Burrow continue that, but Dalton's the one who started that, the Boyd breakout. Targeted him heavily last year. So if Lamb does play primarily in the slot, I think the 60.5 is definitely something I think we're all kind of saying go over on that.
The only thing that's changed is Dak. I mean, we're still talking about a Dallas defense that is porous at best. Yeah, so he's going to have to be slinging it even if he doesn't want to. So everyone's in play, I think.
And this last one was interesting. Andy Isabella, longest reception of 14.5 yards.
I thought that was a gimme as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, that shouldn't say receptions. That should say yards as well. They only had him at 21.5 yards. So I would have thought two receptions at if they're assuming that one of them's at 14.5, he's probably good to hit over 21.5 as well. So I threw that in there for that. But
definitely, 21.5 yards. Yeah, that definitely seems attainable for him. He could theoretically do that in one catch. So I think it definitely smashed that one. And longest reception, probably. I probably like him because that is his game, right? Speed, yards after the catch, kind of Isabella's thing. So, longer reception than 14.5. I think he can definitely get a 15-yard reception, 20-yard reception for sure. So there was some we didn't really recap Sunday. We're not necessarily going to go through that right now. There were a couple questions. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought I was missing something. We're going to talk Steelers now. There you go, Gladys. Interesting question, Dan, that Dan posed. Keep, trade, cut. I know Jeff usually is a drop for that. Keep, trade, cut. There you go.
Yeah, but he usually watches it. So.
Manual drop here. So
watch it anyway.
So Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster. Assuming this is Dynasty.
I didn't make the rules. I didn't make the rules. I just.
Well, and normally when they do, normally when Jeff and Ryan do keep trade cuts, it's usually from a dynasty perspective. So we'll maintain that going for two and keep going in that direction. So keep trade cut. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster. This is actually incredibly difficult. Not gonna lie. Anyone want to take a stab at it first? Steal the spotlight.
I'm gonna let the Steelers go. I'll take this one.
Keep trade cut. Keep. And this is Dynasty we're talking about?
Yeah.
Keep Chase Claypool. Trade.
Ooh.
Juju will probably have the most name recognition, so you would probably get the best trade out of him. And therefore, you would have to cut Deontay because it's the only thing left. But in Dynasty, I would keep Chase Claypool. I would name recognition, trade Juju Smith-Schuster. If the person doesn't realize that he's been hurt and he's been playing like trash, you could probably get something for him. And then cut Deontay Johnson or switch those two. But
who's also hurt right now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Playing away from the injuries. Keep the younger guy who's more athletic, bigger, and not hurt right now.
Yeah.
I lent keep Deontay Johnson, trade Chase Claypool, cut Juju.
I was thinking trade Claypool as well.
Yeah, just
because his value might be huge right now.
Someone has seen this 2-game sample and thought, this is what's going to happen every week.
Someone might trade the moon for Claypool right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And especially if Ben Roethlisberger has 2 more years left and you've got 2 more years of that, well, we can sell Claypool and get everything for him. And we're talking about Juju in a contract year. He doesn't look that great. He might be in another team at the end of the year. So,
would you be able to get CEH for Claypool without giving very much back on the Claypool side? Just because, again, with Bell coming there, I wonder if CEH managers might be a little sour on him right now. Maybe wait a couple weeks until Bell starts playing games, but
that is tough.
Why would you want CEH and Steelers in Pittsburgh if you have Connor and Bell and Snell?
Oh, I mean from a dynasty perspective. Like if you have Chase Claypool, a fantasy team, and you can somehow get one of these young rookie running backs that's maybe struggling. I was gonna say DeAndre Swift, but obviously the sell windows or the buy low windows officially closed with Swift. I wonder.
You could get.
I'm a big Cam Akers fan. How much you could get added onto the Akers side if you gave up Chase Claypool? Because I think it's now to the point where you're probably not even giving up 1-for-1. You're probably getting Akers plus. And if I can get that to happen, I will do that in a heartbeat. So I'd be tempted to trade Claypool as much as I do agree with. It seems like he's the obvious keep, but that almost makes him the obvious trade because he has so much value. Especially if you're in a league that's savvy and is paying attention to Juju's injury and his name recognition doesn't give the value that it does in some other leagues. So.
I've been hearing about this. Like I said, I'm not as big of a Steeler fan as what Gladys would be, but I am a big fan of what they have done this year, and I really think they are making noise. And I saw this, and I was like, man, that would be tough because what Claypool's done in the last 2 games, he's also done them without Deontay Johnson on the lineup too, really.
And without Juju doing anything.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, I know Johnson was out this week and he got hurt the week Claypool went nuts. So it's I don't want to say it's fool's gold because it's not. The guy's done it very, very well, very, very efficiently. But at the same time, if you're talking about 2/3 of those receiver or 50% of that receiver group with Washington not being in the lineup when that's really happened or not really being available, then I think that window to sell Claypool might be now. You can get whatever. You're right. Like if you're talking about Cam Akers, who was a top 3 dynasty running back this year, or rookie pick this year. I mean, that or Hilaire. We're talking about Hilaire. When he went to Kansas, he was almost the 101, right?
When he went to Kansas?
Well, when he got drafted by Kansas. After that, we're going in our rookie drafts. Hilaire, arguably with Taylor, was the 101, 102.
He was. He went in.
There we go. So we're talking about being able to get a guy of that ilk on a team like that. That would be hard. That would be very hard to turn away. If you could get, man, that'd be a tough one.
I guess I'm not as high on CEH because of his inability to get into the end zone. So, I mean, I don't know. I just, with Le'Veon there, and people are going to sell him. They're going to sell him. They should sell him low. And you're going to give Claypool up for that? Is that what you're saying? You would make that trade?
Yeah, I would. Just because, again, I think from a dynasty perspective, the replaceability of these wide receivers, just as easily, someone else could just as easily get 4 touchdowns. Maybe not as easily, but to I guess this year, if Bell comes in and does take away a ton of work, then rookie year, it's kind of a write-off for Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. I don't get the impression Le'Veon Bell's sticking around there next year. I don't think they can pay him. Like
they will have Damian Williams coming back though, right? And what happens with that is anyone's guess. He might be there, he might not as well. So we're talking also in 6-7 months' time, it could be Hilaire and no one on that depth chart. So that is a very interesting buy low candidate with Claypool as the with the bait in front of you. That would be a tough one. That would be great.
I think I would do that if that option was out there to give up Claypool to get Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. I'd do that straight up. I mean, and again, I talk about I'd expect to get more on the side of Akers, but I'd be pretty close to making that straight up as well. Simply, again, I believe in the player, strong running back. It also does depend on how is this team competitive or not. If I really do believe, okay, the team I'm on right now can win right now, then maybe I am holding off Claypool and knowing that I can make that trade at another time as well. But if I'm in a rebuild mode, I don't know that Claypool I mean, yeah, he's good for a rebuild team too, in that he's probably gonna have a good, long, productive career. But yeah, I think if I can get off him to get a rookie running back, because really did like this class and really was a big fan of them all. And again, I think, yeah. So I would do a trade up for CH. That's a long way to say that. I wonder Dobbins. I wonder how much you get added on to Dobbins' side just because he hasn't been getting the work, or because we're all worried about the Ravens game.
You'd have to accept that it's a 1 year. You got to see it out. And we're also talking about a team that they also took Justice Hill, was it the 3rd or 4th round last year as well, and he's now been relegated to nothingness too. So that's a concern as well. If Ingram's not going to be there, and Edwards, he only had the 1 year deal this year, is that right?
I think so. I think he was a RFA and he's a UFA next year, I believe.
Yes, I mean, if we're talking about Ingram possibly being cut at the end of the year and Gus Edwards not being there, it's wheels up for Dobbins and maybe Hill if he's still about in 6 to 8, 9 months' time. But that doesn't mean that back-to-back years that they've drafted a running back, haven't they, the Ravens? And they could go 3 for 3. It's well within the realm of possibilities for them. So Dobbins might be easier to attain. You might not have to give up as much, to be honest with you, at this point.
It could have, and again, if we're tying running backs to explosive offenses, that a lot of touchdown potential for running backs, then yeah, the Ravens definitely fit that bill. And Dobbins has already been catching passes as a rookie, maybe even more so than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So there's that advantage too, but without the 100-yard games and whatnot, the consistent production. So surprise ending here. We're gonna one more segment, not really segment, but talk about surprises earlier. The Bills being a really surprising team. What's the bigger surprise right now? Robbie Anderson as the QB, as the wide receiver 4, or DJ Moore as the wide receiver 22? I have a very obvious answer here, but I'll let
it should be obvious. Yeah.
Robbie Anderson. I mean, he was, when you, in the drafts, every draft that I've been in, the knock on him was that he was a boomer bust player, that he wasn't going to consistently perform for you, that you're going to get him and he's going to be that guy that either gets the touchdown, he's going to be Hollywood Brown, basically. And that he has outperformed DJ Moore and is actually, what is he in fantasy? What did you?
I think Dan said wide receiver 4 on the show sheet. So
that's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I put this in for a reason. Are you trading for or away either of them? Because if you're trading away DJ Moore, you're not trading him at what he was at the end of 2019. Yeah. And if you're trading away Robbie Anderson, what are you trading for to get him? That's a wide receiver 4. That's insane.
I would trade for Anderson if his production, or if his value hasn't quite caught up to his production yet. Some people might still be really hesitant.
It's going to be a cliff, right?
Yeah, people may be expecting that. Another game. Well, this game's Curtis Samuel is out, although that hasn't really been a factor. He's clearly been one of the top 2. Maybe the Robbie Anderson owner wants to sell out now while they can, thinking they're selling high, maybe expecting a dip in production when Christian McCaffrey comes back. So I think I wouldn't overpay for Robbie Anderson. If I'm a contending team looking to give up picks, it's tough to give up a first for him. But with his production right now, you may have to. So I don't know. I mean, if you can do it for a second, I would do that.
I feel like DJ Moore is much more attainable. The problem is, 6 months ago, that guy was almost untouchable to a lot of people.
I think the people who have him, they probably still consider him a top 10 wide receiver, right? Because I mean, there's people who were taking him as a top 5 guy in startups, right? Or at least a top 5 wide receiver anyway. So I'm not totally surprised that he's 22, just in the fact that it's such a thin margin between, let's say, wide receiver 7 all the way down to wide receiver 30, basically. Like a few touchdowns, a few catches, really you go from one extreme to the other of that group. And with only 1 touchdown on the season, DJ Moore is kind of on that lower extent. So yeah, if you can buy low at all on him, I think the people who considered him top 5 wide receiver entering the season probably aren't willing to sell low. But if someone else has them that it isn't quite as high on him, then go give up Robbie Anderson to try and get DJ Moore.
Well, I think that you wouldn't be surprised that where he is because you wouldn't have had that much confidence in that offense with Teddy Bridgewater throwing. I think I read somewhere that 58.8% of Teddy Bridgewater's yards are yards after catch that his receivers are doing. So you wouldn't expect Robbie Anderson to be that high, but if someone didn't tell you where Robbie Anderson was and they told you where DJ Moore was, it would be understandable because you wouldn't think there was anyone higher than him on that team. Do you know what I'm saying? Unless it was CMC, because no one expected that offense to be producing, so to speak. You have a new offensive coordinator, new coach, new quarterback, and you lose your number one producer. Yeah, I wouldn't have drafted DJ Moore. I wouldn't have drafted Robbie Anderson either, and that's a big mistake. But yeah, Dan, you've gone dark again.
Dan after dark.
There we go.
Just need a little bit of light. I don't need much. so in that, and obviously everything is done for a reason. I put those questions in. Who are you starting week by week if you had to choose between Robbie Anderson or Chase Claypool?
Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, how consistent he's been. I think I'd have to go with Anderson as well right now.
Especially if you get Deontay Johnson back and Juju gets over this ankle injury. I'm assuming that's what's slowing him down. I would start Robbie Anderson. I think he's more consistent.
Yeah, he certainly has been this year.
Level is there. Yeah. Who would you start?
It's only like a 0.7 points per game difference between Claypool and Anderson at this point. Isn't that madness? 18.6 to 17 point whatever. That is insane.
Yeah, but Claypool had like 4 touchdowns in one game, which is skewing that.
I'm very well aware, and that's why that's.
You just wanted to brag about that again.
No. I'm just saying, like the whole concept to put these in there is that we're talking about Anderson, and people kind of don't believe this at this point.
I know.
And we've seen 2 games from Claypool. Kind of
in your minds.
That's right. So, you're looking at. People aren't even talking about Anderson as a wide receiver 1 at this point. They still kind of don't believe it. They think that Jets form's going to come in, and it hasn't looked like it at all. So, in that case, who would you start Claypool over? Deontay Johnson? Who would you start Claypool over? Robbie Anderson, Deontay Johnson, or Juju Smith-Schuster?
I think I'd start Claypool over Johnson just until I see Johnson get healthy and productive.
I would start him over both Johnson and Juju, but I wouldn't start him over Anderson.
So we're saying Anderson is ahead of the trio?
Yes.
That's crazy. What a world.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm not entirely convinced on Claypool over Juju most weeks. Again, it seems like he is dealing with maybe a bit of an injury. So, but because he hasn't missed time, it doesn't seem like it's nearly as serious as Deontay Johnson's injury. So, maybe look to see him come back a bit next week, although we got a tough matchup against the Titans. I think definitely next week. I don't know who the Panthers are playing, but it's
New Orleans, I think. I feel like I just looked that up.
I think I'd definitely rather play Robbie Anderson in that game than any of the Steelers against the Titans, that's for sure. But even most weeks without matchups, I think I would still go with Anderson, but definitely magnified next week.
You're worried about the Titans' defense?
That's true. I guess passing-wise, they have been very vulnerable. Malcolm Butler is back, though. I know he's missed a few games with injury, but it actually didn't seem to – he couldn't stop Will Fuller that much. So,
but then you're talking about the Buffalo Bills. You're talking about Josh Allen compared to Big Ben.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't think he's going to try to throw into coverages that Allen tried to throw into.
That's fair. Yeah, Ben does seem at least smarter with football-wise.
Football-wise.
Yeah, wow. Let's not get into that. And I think actually, I think the Bills game is on now, so I think we're gonna let the people go, let them enjoy their football. But I appreciate everyone for joining, asking questions. A lot of trade talk. It's that time of year. Teams are really deciding where they see themselves, and in redraft leagues trying to improve. So as always, we're here every Monday night. Be a little later most Mondays. Maybe, I guess, it's going to depend week to week how many Monday night games there are. So count your blessings. You have 2 Monday night football games.
Exactly. Thanks for joining in. CH already has 12 yards rushing, by the way.
One of them was a 9-yard rush.
It was it?
It was the first play of the game. He went for 9 yards. It looked all right. Both teams are basically looking very skittish at the moment. But
again, both coming off losses. Maybe a little not wanting to make early mistakes. Maybe I wonder.
They've been starting slow anyway, so I'm not really worried. Thank you guys for joining.
Yes.
We'll see you next
Bye, Gladys. Bye, Dan.
Bye, Dan. Bye.
have a good week. See you next week.
Yeah. Enjoy, everyone. Bye.